So, you've probably heard the stories, right? These tales of secret societies pulling the strings from behind the curtain. But what if one of the most famous, or infamous, of these groups was something else entirely? Not some shadowy conspiracy, but an intellectual order so effective that it terrified the most powerful nations on Earth. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of the Jesuits.
And this, right here, is the question we really have to get our heads around. I mean, think about it. They didn't have armies. They weren't a massive bank. The fear they inspired came from something way more powerful. Their minds, their incredible organization, and a very unique kind of loyalty.
To really get why they were so feared, we have to rewind the clock. We're going back to the 16th century, a time when Europe was in total chaos. The entire religious and political world was fracturing, and right in the middle of that upheaval, a totally new kind of organization was born.
Founded way back in 1540, the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits as we know them, was built for action. You see, while traditional monks were often secluded in monasteries, the Jesuits were designed to be out in the world, right in the centers of power, in the cities, in the royal courts, and in the great universities. They were basically the intellectual front line in the battle against the Protestant Reformation.
Okay, so their power and all the suspicion that came with it really stemmed from a structure that was, for its time, absolutely revolutionary. It was designed from the ground up to create a small, super-educated, and fiercely dedicated group of members.
Becoming a full-on Jesuit was an absolute marathon. We're not kidding. It was over a decade of grueling study in philosophy, theology, and science, and that's after you'd already been a novice for 2 years. This wasn't about just filling seats in a church. This was about forging an elite intellectual force.
And here it is. This is the single most controversial, most radical part of their entire design, the fourth vow. On top of the usual vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, the core Jesuit members took a special oath of direct obedience to the Pope himself. Now think about that. In an age where national identity was everything, you suddenly have this group whose ultimate boss wasn't a king or a country, but an outside power. You can see why monarchs started to get a little paranoid.
So you take that unique structure, you combine it with their deep involvement in the highest levels of society, and boom, you get a powerful and often pretty terrifying myth that has stuck around for centuries.
Because they were right there, acting as confessors and tutors, the kings and princes, it was just so easy to see them as the puppeteers. Any weird political event or crisis could be blamed on some secret Jesuit plot. They were accused of being everything from the Pope's secret police to this vast, invisible empire that was really running the world.
And this is so key to understanding their reputation. The Jesuits became the ultimate conspiracy theory. They were the simple answer to really complex problems. It was way easier to believe in a secret group of masterminds than to face the messy, complicated reality of how power actually works.
But just as this myth of their absolute power was at its absolute peak, something happened. Something that completely shatters that illusion of them being invincible. A series of events that, frankly, an all-powerful secret society should have been able to stop in its tracks.
Just look at this timeline. It's brutal. One after another, the most powerful Catholic monarchies in Europe, the very same governments they were supposed to be controlling, turned on them. They were kicked out, their schools and property were taken, until finally, in 1773, the Pope himself, under huge political pressure, signed a document that just dissolved the entire order.
This slide right here lays out the whole contradiction, doesn't it? It's just so stark. If the Jesuits were really the secret masters of the world, how in the world could they be completely wiped out by a single signature on a piece of paper? The fact that they were suppressed is probably the single best piece of evidence against all those conspiracy theories.
But their story does not end there. Not by a long shot. After they were eventually brought back in 1814, the Jesuits made a major pivot. They stepped away from the dangerous game of advising kings and instead doubled down on their original and maybe their most powerful source of influence.
You see, their real power was never about secret plots. It was in the classroom. They went on to build one of the most respected and formidable global networks of elite universities and schools the world has ever known. From Georgetown here in the US to Sophia University in Japan, they put their energy into shaping the minds of future leaders, scientists, and thinkers.
And they do all of this without huge numbers. There are only about 15,000 Jesuits in the entire world today. The strength comes from being a small, incredibly well-educated, and deeply connected global community.
So where does that leave the Jesuits in the 21st century?
Well, the old myth of the shadowy cabal is pretty much faded away, but their influence, that hasn't gone anywhere. It's just changed its shape.
And this quote just nails it perfectly. The goal was never world domination, not in the way we think of it. You can think of them more as a highly effective, borderless organization that's dedicated to intellectual and spiritual goals. Their secret, if they even had one, was just a brilliant system for creating and sharing knowledge. And today, you see their influence out in the open. It's there in the election of the first ever Jesuit Pope, Pope Francis. You see it in the scientific and philosophical work coming out of their universities. It's in their active role in global conversations about ethics, social justice, and human rights. Their presence isn't covert anymore, it's institutional.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We used to think power was all about armies and thrones and territory. But in our modern world, a world that runs on information, where ideas can cross the globe in an instant, well, maybe the real, lasting power belongs to the quiet networks that create and share knowledge.